Molly Brown, born Margaret Tobin, was born on the 18th of July, 1867, in Hannibal, Missouri. Her parents, John Tobin and Joanna Collins, were Irish immigrants that came to America looking for a better life for them and their children. Her father and mother alike were both widowed with a daughter when they met. Following their marriage, they had 4 children: Daniel, Margaret, William, and Helen. Margaret's father worked at Hannibal Gas Works, but despite his decent salary, it was difficult to provide for the family of 8. This was because the family were fairly poor, just like most immigrants of this time, and the children were put to work as soon as they were teenagers to help out with the family finances. Despite her family's economic situation, Margaret grew up in a cozy cottage just meters from the Mississippi River. Furthermore, as a child she received a good education as she attended a grammar school which happened to be run by her aunt, Mary O'Leary. At the age of 13, she stopped going to school in order to help out her family. She worked stripping tobacco leaves at Garth's Tobacco Company in Hannibal. In 1883, Margaret's half-sister, Mary Ann, married a man called Jack Landrigan, and together they moved to Leadville, Colorado, a prosperous silver mining town. Shortly after this, Margaret's elder brother Daniel also moved to Leadville. He began working in the mines, and eventually he became a successful mine promoter. In 1886, at the age of 18, Margaret too joined her siblings in Leadville. She worked for the dry goods firm Daniels and Fisher Mercantile, where she sold carpets and draperies. It was in the summer of 1886, at the church picnic, that she met James Joseph Brown, also the child of Irish immigrants. After a few months together, the couple married on the 1st of September 1886 at the Annunciation Church in Leadville. They moved into a small cabin together and had 2 children. Following the birth of their second child in 1889, they bought a house in Leadville and were eventually joined by members of both their families. In 1893, Leadville was thrust into a deep depression and unemployment rose to around 90%. Fortunately for the Browns, James Joseph had recently been promoted to superintendent of all the Ibex mining properties. Because of the hardships of many of those in Leadville, Margaret started to help out the less fortunate by working in soup kitchens. It was also around this time that she was involved in the early US feminist movement. With James Joseph now working as superintendent, he had a very bright idea. He believed that the Little Johnny mine, which had only produced silver, could become a producer of gold. In order to accomplish this, he devised a timber and hay bale method to hold back the dolomite sand that had prevented them from reaching the gold at the lower depths of the mine. By the 29th of October, the Little Johnny mine was shipping 135 tons of ore per day. Due to Brown's ingenious idea, he was awarded 12,500 shares of stock, as well as a seat on the board. Over the years, he became one of the most successful mining men in the country. With their newfound wealth, the couple purchased a home in Pennsylvania Street in Denver, and also commissioned the construction of a summer home. In Denver, Margaret continued pursuing what she believed in, mainly women's rights and helping the less fortunate. She became a founding member of the Denver Women's Club. This group advocated literacy, education, suffrage, and human rights across the US. Furthermore, she raised funds to aid impoverished children throughout Denver, and even helped financing the construction of the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception and the St. Joseph Hospital. Moreover, she worked alongside judges to establish the first juvenile court in America, which would eventually become the basis for today's US juvenile court system. While doing all this, she raised her 2 children, as well as 3 of her nieces, following the death of their mother, who was Margaret's sister-in-law. To continue her pursuit for women's rights, Margaret Brown ran for the office of Senate. She was one of the first women to do so, even though This was 8 years before women had the right to vote, which is a testament to her determination. In the spring of 1912, Margaret and her daughter Helen had spent time travelling through Cairo. Following this, they visited various countries in Europe, and eventually they made it to Paris. But soon after their arrival, Margaret received news that one of her grandchildren was very ill. Upon hearing this, she decided that she needed to get home as soon as possible. Margaret booked passage on the earliest ship to New York, which was to set sail on the 12th of April. While in London, Margaret's daughter, Helen, made a last-minute decision to stay as she didn't feel the urgency to see her niece. Because of this, Margaret's friends and family believed that she had stayed behind with Helen in London, but she didn't. She set sail from Southampton aboard the maiden voyage of the most extravagant ship of its time, the RMS Titanic. On the evening of the 14th of April, the Titanic struck an iceberg. When it became clear that the ship was going down and passengers needed to be evacuated, Margaret assisted fellow passengers into lifeboats, and eventually she was shoved into lifeboat 6. Margaret worked with the other survivors to row and maintain morale among her fellow companions. Over 1,500 passengers lost their lives that night, and the Titanic sank into the depths of the North Atlantic Ocean. Eventually, the survivors were rescued by the RMS Carpathia, and it was here that Margaret's people skills came to light. Aboard the Carpathia, she assisted hundreds of Titanic survivors, and by the time the ship arrived at New York Harbor, she had successfully established the Survivors Committee, of which she was elected as chair, and raised almost $10,000 for destitute survivors. Margaret's fluency in various languages, such as Russian, German, and French, were a great asset while communicating to fellow survivors. But her selflessness didn't stop there. She was the last survivor to disembark the Carpathia, as she waited until all the Titanic survivors had met with friends, family, or received the necessary emergency assistance before continuing her journey home. Soon after this, she wrote a letter to her daughter. In it, she stated, "After being brinned, salted and pickled in mid-ocean, I am now high and dry. I have had flowers, letters, telegrams. They are petitioning Congress to give me a medal. If I must call a specialist to examine my head, it's due to the title of Heroine of the Titanic." She also wrote to her attorney, and her positive attitude prevailed despite the tragedy that she had just witnessed. In her letter, she replied, "Thanks for the kind thoughts. Water was fine, and swimming good. Neptune was exceedingly kind to me, and I am now high and dry." In the following months, as chair of the Survivors Committee, she awarded the captain of the Carpathia with a long, silver-loving cup and a medal to each crew member. Furthermore, she wrote about what she had witnessed during the events of the 14th of April, and her account was published in newspapers around the world. Margaret made good use of her newfound fame to raise awareness of various social issues. These included labour rights, women's rights, and education for children. On the 25th of July, 1914, Margaret, with the help of Alva Vanderbilt Belmont, organised an international rights conference at Marble House in Newport, Rhode Island. This conference was attended by human rights activists from around the world. In 1914, Margaret unsuccessfully ran a second time for the US Senate. That same year, during a miners' strike in Ludlow, Colorado, those that went on strike and their families were attacked by certain members of the Colorado National Guard. This led to the death of over 20 people. The event was kept as discreet as possible, but Margaret heard news of this, and her sympathy toward the miners led to her bringing worldwide attention to what would later be known as the Ludlow Massacre. During the First World War, Margaret donated her summer home in Newport, Rhode Island, to the American Red Cross to support the war effort. Then, she travelled overseas to serve as a director for the American Committee for devastated France. While there, she helped to coordinate the reconstruction of the devastated areas behind the front line, and also worked with wounded French and American soldiers. Following this, she continued to live a comfortable life and carried on with her charitable activities, as well as speaking out for what she believed in. Furthermore, Margaret continued to travel and escaped disaster a second time when the hotel she was staying at in Palm Beach, Florida, caught on fire. Margaret took control of the situation, as she had done many times before, and led other guests to safety down a fire escape. All made it out unharmed. In 1932, the French government awarded her with the French Legion of Honor for her overall good citizenship. This was in recognition for all her work throughout the years, always putting others before herself. On the 26th of October 1932, Margaret Tobin Brown died in her sleep due to a brain tumor. She had been staying in the Barbizon Hotel in New York as she was working with a young actress. After a simple funeral service, Margaret was buried next to her husband in the cemetery of the Holy Rood in Westbury, New York. Margaret Brown once said, "It isn't who you are, nor what you have, but what you are that counts." She is remembered for her courage, social activism, and generosity to others. It has to be mentioned that the legend of the Unsinkable Molly was a Hollywood invention, which was very different to the life of the real Margaret Tobin Brown. Firstly, she was never known as Molly, and secondly, she was fully accepted by society and her family, which is very different to how the unsinkable Molly Brown has been portrayed by Hollywood. Thank you everyone for watching this video on the real unsinkable Molly Brown. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave me a comment and a like. And also let me know what you think of not putting titles in. I'm sure some of you probably don't even watch it and just listen, but I thought I'd mix it up a bit, and let me know if you prefer the titles or just having images the whole way through, so I can see what to do in future videos. Anyway, that's all from me, so I will see you all in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks!